Welcome to the Jack Sunday Show. There are lots of ways of stacking pedals, and all of them are pretty effective, but what I'm going to show you today is how to stack some of the pedals I've designed in some of my favorite ways, so stay tuned. My name is Brad Jackson, and whether I'm flying airplanes or building pedals, I'm always learning. Join me, and together we'll expand our horizons. This is Jackson Audio. Okay, so back maybe 10, 15 years ago, when I was doing more gigging than I'm doing now, certainly, around the DFW area, I never had a pedal board. And I know that sounds crazy for a guy that owns a pedal company, but I just never made the time to put together a good board for myself. And I have some really dear friends that for my birthday, they decided that they had had enough of that, because I would literally roll into a gig with I remember coming to gigs with like a grocery store bag full of pedals and patch cables and setting my stuff on the floor, patching together at the gig, and I would almost make a custom pedal board for every gig. If I didn't need a chorus pedal, well, I wouldn't put it on that day. But it was really, really janky, and my friends had had enough of that, so they were super kind to me, and they made me a pedal board for my birthday. And what they did was they made me a custom pedal board that actually it had a white V on the front of the pedal board that matched my amp, so that was super cool. But what they did do that I didn't know about was they went into the shop where I kept all my stuff, they stole all my pedals, they even talked to my friends at JHS. And Josh and John Pennington were so stinking sweet. They made me a clone that's a very special one-off clone. It's called the Brad Tar, because instead of a picture of a guy's face on the Centaur, it's actually my face. So I'll never sell that pedal, mostly because nobody in their right mind would ever buy a pedal with my face on it. So it's a really special thing. I'm super grateful for those guys for making it. It's a very, very much a prized piece of equipment for me. But what the guys did when they built my board, they got the clone from JHS, but they also got two more pedals from JHS. They bought two Prestiges, which is their MOSFET boost. It's an awesome sounding pedal. I strongly recommend you check it out. It's phenomenal. So I had the clone in the middle, and on each side of the clone was flanked by their Prestige. So I had a Prestige going into the front of the clone, and then I had a Prestige going out of the clone, so you'd get a pre-boost into the clone and a post-boost out of the clone. It was awesome. And here's what I would do. I would run something like a Newcastle 30, a single channel amp that we made back in the day. And I would run one of the Prestiges as an always on, because it just kind of made everything fatter and bigger. And that's a great, great sound. And then I would run for like a dirty rhythm sound. I would just stick the second Prestige on. It sounded awesome because it boosted the first Prestige and just punched the amp really hard. It was really great. Now, if you want to go over the top, I would put the clone on, or even just run the clone with one of the always on Prestiges. But what that did was it was kind of got me thinking about the idea of stacking pedals to expand a very simple amp. A lot of times it's easier to buy a simple amp that you really connect with how it sounds, but you just want to expand it. You don't want to buy a 4 or 5 channel amp. You can buy one great amp like a Fender Bassman, does one thing really well, then just start expanding it by adding pedals that you can use as gain stages to punch it harder, make them overdrive different ways. But then you start getting into the idea of stacking pedals, not because they push the amp harder, but like how one pedal will influence the other pedal. If you swap the order, it does a completely different thing. Trust me, if you go down this road, it is a Pandora's box. There is no end to it, and once you let the genie out of the bottle, you will forever be messing with this thing, because it's a lot of fun to take different combinations of pedals, and you can create sounds that no one's ever heard before because you take a certain recipe and stack it up a certain way. Okay, so what we have here is a 335 going into a Jackson Ampworks Britain. We're going to the second channel, which is just a straight up top boost AC30, no mods. So hopefully you kind of get a really good idea of what the core sound is. And I'll just start adding pedals, like the amp mode, add a second one to it, add the bell star. If we've ever made a sleeper pedal in our entire lives, a pedal that people just don't know about and don't realize how awesome it is, it's the Bell Star. That's a pedal we designed in tandem with Drew Shirley from Switchfoot. It's his signature pedal, and what it is, it's a low gain, kind of a transparent overdrive thing, but we designed it so that it sounds like a really small amp that's about to explode, which if you know Drew and his rig, he always plays these super tiny little Supros and Valcos, all these really great little amps. You wouldn't think so, but he can take those little amps and make the biggest wall of sound you've ever heard in your life. And it's just completely counterintuitive, but Drew Shirley is a master of that sound. And he can take, like, again, simple, tiny amps and make it sound like the biggest production in the world because he knows how to tweak those amps and make them do what they do. This pedal is inspired by that sound, and we showed it to Drew and said, hey, we made this pedal with you in mind. What do you think about this? And he took it and loved it. So here's the core sound right now. We got the 335 going into the top boost channel. So we'll add the amp mode, set at 12 o'clock, not pushing it super hard, but it gets better. So typically what I'll do, that'll be my always on sound because I can always back the volume off a little bit on the guitar. It keeps that clarity, adds a nice buffer to the sound, or adds a buffer to the signal. So if you're running long cable runs like I was doing back in the day, it helps push your signal quite a bit harder. But let's add a second amp mode to the amp mode. Now we're stacking 2 MOSFET boosts together. Okay, a lot of guys would use that as their full-on, maybe even their heavy lead tone, but you can always take it one step farther, and I try to whenever possible. So let's add the bell start in between. Let's see what it does. So for me, that's as high gain as I ever play. I'm not a metal guy. I try to stay kind of in the Americana wheelhouse, but that to me is a really high gain sound. But keep in mind, the whole time I've been running one channel on the amp. It's a super simple amp, great sound, but now I'm just stacking things together to give me different flavors. But let's hear some stuff, maybe by itself. Check out the bell start by itself. Take that, goose it in the front with the amp mode. All right, check this out. I want to work backwards and show you something. I want to talk a little bit about how to run your amp with a bunch of stacked pedals and how that can completely change the way your sound responds based on where the volume is, or rather the gain on your amp. So let's work our way backwards. I'll see if I can teach you how that works. All the pedals are on right now. We're as high as gains we're gonna get. And I've got the volume on the amp at 12 o'clock. So it's pretty goosey. Now, I would say that's the amp feels like it's about to kind of give up and quit, because there's a point to where you push a tube amp and it sounds great, it keeps getting better and better and better, but there's a point of like where it just folds over and dies. So let me show you this. 12 o'clock on this amp is about where that happens in my mind. But let's listen to how it sounds when you back the volume down to say 9 o'clock on the volume, and it gets tighter. Everything kind of pulls together a little bit because the amp isn't to the point of just complete saturation. So here we are again, all pedals on, amp to 12 o'clock. Back that down. And here's the volume at 9 o'clock on the Britain. To me, that radically feels different for sure. But what I hear different is that the sound is more, how do I say, it's just tighter. It's just tighter, feels more focused, and it feels to me like it would sit in a track a whole lot better because it has more definition on the highs, and the mid hasn't turned to mush. So I'll just do a quick comparison. I would say that I actually prefer the sound of the amp turned down just a little bit because it gives you more headroom. And that's something that's super, super critical. You've heard people talk about amps that take pedals really, really well and some amps that don't. One of the things about an amp, and I'll try to give you the secret because I've only built a few thousand amps in my career. When people are saying that an amp takes pedals really, really well, what they're trying to say in their own way is that the amp has a lot of headroom. That's a huge thing to think about if you're a pedal player. My twin on the floor, it's got more headroom than you'll ever need because you'd have to just rip your ears off to get that amp to saturate the way this little Britain does here. So you can fake out headroom. If you have an AC30 or something like that, which those amps don't have headroom, they were never designed to have headroom, they actually clip pretty easily. You can fake your way into headroom by just rolling the volume back a little bit. Find a good sound with all your pedals on, as high gain as you want to get. Find that point on the volume control where the sound stays intact. And at that point, you can start taking pedals out. You can hear how things sound. And you'll be surprised to find that your volume is a lot lower than you may have thought it would be. But it all stays together. Your sound stays really articulate, which is huge, especially in a band context. So let me show you what that sounds like just real quick. If we agree, or I guess I agree with myself, that 9 o'clock sounds good in the volume, let's see what it sounds like as you start backing your way out. Actually, let's pull this one out. And finally, the amp is hardly working at all, but it sounds great. It holds together really musically with all things engaged. And frankly, you would never typically think, oh, I'm gonna set my amp at about 9 o'clock. That is like squeaky clean, like it's hardly breaking up at all. Not really counterintuitive, but if you start thinking of things as the whole system of tools and pedals and start backing your way out of what you've already created, you can start to realize, oh man, pushing the front of the amp really is a huge part of what stacking pedals does, because you're pushing it in different ways. You're boosting certain frequencies. You're either boosting it with harmonic content or you're boosting the next pedal in line with harmonic content from the pedal. There's a lot of different things happening. And I don't claim to know the science of everything, but I just know that if it sounds good, it is good. That's what matters. In a band context, if it sounds good, it is good. So that's the kind of the golden rule behind all my tone choices, is that simple precept. So what I've got here is a 1963 Gibson ES-335 that my grandfather bought for the whopping sum of $300. It is absolutely my prized possession in this world. If the house caught on fire, I would be thinking about my children as I ran for this guitar to get this guitar out of the house. No, I'm kidding, but it is very near and dear to me, and it is a blessing in my life. And I never did get to meet my grandfather. He passed away while Mom was carrying me. So it is the one thing that I have that came from the man, and I can't think of a better present that any grandfather could give a son or grandson than a 63 335. You can't top that. So every time I see it, I think of the man that I never met, that I would have loved to have met. So this is my prized possession, and that's what it sounds like. Guys, thank you for watching the show. It's a blast to kind of walk back through, at least mentally, the rig that I used to play back in the day when live music was still a thing. Now, what I need you to do for me, if you would, in the comments, tell me your secrets. Tell me what you know about pedals that stack well together, because there's some pedals, they stack well together, some pedals don't. If you found a magic combination of things that work well together, share with us, let us know, and we can all grow from this. I certainly will. I'll take your comments, and if I can reproduce it here with all the tools that I've got, I'll give it a go and see what it sounds like. But guys, thank you so much for watching. It's a blast to do this kind of stuff for you, and to kind of remind myself of the rigs that I made in years past. But thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. If you would please, if you haven't subscribed already, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell icon, and you'll be notified whenever we put new content out, which is always on Sunday, because this is the Jack Sunday show. So every Sunday at noon will be a new episode of the show, and we look forward to seeing you there. Tell your friends, and hopefully we can all learn and get better at our craft from learning together. So thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week. Take care.